The sheriff ordered her hanged. "I'll take her place." Those two sentences rang out less than a minute apart. Yet they were enough to turn the whole course of two lives in that dusty border town. That noon in Red Wash was so hot not even a fly had the strength to move. Dust lay over the rooftops, over the saloon sign, over people's faces. In the middle of the square stood a low wooden platform with a crossbeam. Folks usually used it to hang notices. Sometimes they hung wolf hides there. Today, a noose hung from it. Under the noose stood a young woman. Her hands were tied behind her back, brown hair pulled back in a hurry, skirt torn along the hem. Her face was swollen and streaked with dust, but her eyes were clear and open. Her name was Abigail Moore. People in town called her something shorter. Little Moore, the girl who killed a man. Sheriff Clay Maddox stood a few steps away, chest pushed out, badge shining. He read the sentence from a wrinkled sheet, his voice as flat as if he were reading a supply list. Defendant Abigail Moore, found guilty of shooting and killing Jed Hollis in the alley behind the saloon. In front of two witnesses, refused to plead. The county statute says that is enough. Punishment. Death by hanging. The crowd around them went still, then buzzed again. Someone clicked his tongue. Someone spat in the dust. "Woman or not, she pulled a gun," a rough male voice said. Could he hang her so folks remember? No one mentioned that Jed Hollis had been drunk, that he grabbed her arm behind the saloon, dragged her into the dark. That part was easy to forget. On the edge of the crowd stood a man in an old brown hat, faded coat, a long white scar on his left hand. His name was Owen Price, owner of a small cattle ranch on the far side of the dry creek. His wife had died of pneumonia 3 years earlier. Their child never made it into this world. Since then, he had lived alone with a thin herd, and evenings so quiet, he could hear the wind hiss through cracks in the wall. Owen had come to town that day only to buy salt and nails and see if there might be a letter for him, though he did not expect one. He had no thought of going near the square. But when someone said, "They're hanging Little Moore at noon," he turned his head. He had seen her a few times before, carrying trays in the cafe, hauling buckets from the well behind the boarding house. Whenever a man called to her in that teasing way, Abigail just gave a small smile and moved aside. Once he saw her quietly tuck half a leftover loaf into a widow's hand out behind the kitchen. No one else noticed. Owen had been watching through an open window. Now she stood beneath the noose. Her collar was torn, and above it he could see a fresh bruise along her throat. Something tightened in his chest. Not because he knew for certain she was innocent, but because he could not see any trace of a murderer in her eyes. He saw something else. The same look he had seen in his wife's face when the doctor said there was nothing more to be done. That feeling that the whole world had already decided, and all you could do was stand there and watch. Sheriff Maddox folded the paper. "If you have last words," he said, "speak them." Abigail wet her dry lips. Her voice was hoarse, yet it carried. "I am not begging for my life," she said. I just want to say this. I did not shoot Jed Hollis to steal his billfold. I shot because if I had not, he would have done worse to me. God knows that. As for you men, believe it or not, as you please." A dry laugh rippled through the crowd. Someone said in a low but clear voice, "Women always have a reason." Maddox shrugged. "That is for God to weigh," he said. I only do my job." He gestured to his deputy. The man stepped up onto the platform. He slipped the noose around Abigail's neck, pulled it snug. The rope scraped against her skin with a harsh sound. Owen felt his feet move before his mind caught up. Each step forward felt like stepping onto strange ground. The crowd parted and left a narrow path. He heard someone whisper, "Price, that widower." The deputy froze with one hand still on the rope. "What do you want, Price?" he snapped. Owen looked up at the woman under the noose. A bit of hair blew across her cheek in the hot wind. He turned toward Maddox. His mouth was dry. His heart pounded so hard he was sure folks could hear it. "I have something to say," he told him. "To the sheriff, and to this town." The square went silent. Owen took off his hat. He did not look at the crowd. He looked straight into Maddox's eyes. "The sheriff has ordered her hanged," he said, one word at a time. "If you need a neck for that rope, you can have mine. I'll take her place." The air seemed to grow thick. Somewhere a tin cup clattered to the ground. The deputy stood frozen on the step. Abigail did too. She stared down at the man she had only ever seen as a blurred face through the cafe doorway. A question rose in her eyes. "What are you doing? And why?" Maddox planted his hands on his hips. "Say that again, Price." Owen swallowed hard. "I said," he repeated, "if in this town somebody has to die on a rope today so folks can feel the law still means something, then let it be me, not her." That was the sentence that split open the burning afternoon in Red Wash. And no one standing there knew that from that moment on, it would not be only a death sentence put to the test. The walls inside a widower's heart and inside a woman falsely condemned had just taken their first cracks. The square burst into noise like a struck beehive. Someone cursed. Someone laughed out loud. Someone else just stared at Owen as if they were looking at a madman. "You trying to put on a show, Price?" A man from the saloon stepped out and called. "You know who she is? That girl's a killer." Owen stood bareheaded in the sun. Sweat slid down the back of his neck. He did not turn toward the voices. He kept his eyes on Maddox. Sheriff Clay Maddox chewed his plug of tobacco slow. His eyes narrowed. He was no stranger to drunk men yelling foolish things in public. But Owen Price was not drunk. From where he stood, the sheriff could see Owen's hand shaking. Not from whiskey, from the knowledge that he had just stepped across a line. "County law doesn't say a word about swapping necks," Maddox said evenly. "The sentence today is for Abigail Moore, not for Owen Price. You don't buy the law with one loud sentence at noon." "What about God's law?" An older voice carried out from the shade. Reverend Hale stepped from the church porch, moving slow because his back was stiff. "I don't know every detail of what happened in that alley," he said. "But I know this. If you hang that girl in front of the whole town without even looking again, and another man steps forward and says, 'Hang me instead,' maybe the problem isn't with God. Maybe the problem is with how we use the word justice." The crowd muttered. Maddox frowned a little. He glanced up at the platform. Abigail stood still, the rope still around her neck. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes were locked on the man below. She had no idea what was happening. You know her, Price?" the sheriff asked. "How long have you been acquainted with this girl that you dare say such a thing?" "I don't know her," Owen answered. "I just know she works at the cafe. I've seen her hand half a leftover loaf to a widow. I've seen her step away from drunk men. Today I see finger marks on her throat. Fresh bruises. That's what I know." "Not enough to wipe away a killing," Maddox said. "2 witnesses saw her fire that gun. Jed Hollis is lying dead, bullet in his chest. Those are facts. The rest is story." Owen drew a slow breath. "Then, at least," he said, "hang the 2 of us if you must. But don't hang her alone just so you can keep the shine on your badge." The square roared again. Somebody shouted, "Crazy fool." A couple of women tittered under a porch roof. But inside all that noise there was a long, still space between 3 people, the sheriff, the widower, and the woman under the noose. Maddox turned to Reverend Hale. "What do you think, Reverend?" Hale studied him for a moment. "I think," he said, If a man is willing to put his neck in that rope for someone who's nearly a stranger, the least we can do is give them one night in a cell instead of on the gallows. Tomorrow at sunrise, if the truth is still what you say it is, the scaffold will still be standing. So will the rope. The sheriff spat into the dust. He did not like being pushed in front of a crowd, but he liked even less the thought that his name might be remembered as the man who hanged a girl without giving her even one more day. "All right," he said at last. "Take her down. Lock them both up. I'll give you till dawn. After that, if nothing changes, I'll do my job." The deputy slipped the noose from Abigail's neck. Her knees buckled as she stepped down. Her head spun. Her legs were numb. The deputy gripped her arm tight. Another man took hold of Owen's wrist. Side by side, like two convicts, they were led away between two rows of staring eyes. The jail in Red Wash was small. 2 cells, rusted bars. They put Owen in the right-hand cell, Abigail in the left. The iron doors clanged shut. The sound of the key turning was cold. "You're crazy." Abigail spoke first. Her voice was rough, but no longer shaking. "You don't know who I am. You don't know whether I shot Jed or not." Owen sat down on the wooden bench, his fingers laced together. He looked at her through the bars. "I know this much," he said. 3 years ago, my wife lay burning up with fever. A doctor came, took one look, said she couldn't be saved, then went off to drink. I stood there and did nothing. Ever since then, every night, I hear that door close again in my head." He paused a moment. "Today," he went on, "if I just stood and watched one more woman get hauled up into that rope while there was still some doubt inside me, I don't think I'd live through the next 3 years." Abigail let her head rest back against the wall. She did not say thank you, and she did not call him a fool. She simply asked one question, very softly. "If tomorrow morning they still mean to hang me, will you take your words back?" Owen met her gaze. "No," he said. "If they hang anybody, I still want them to go through my neck first. At least then we'll know a man can do something besides just stand still." Out in the hallway, Sheriff Maddox had been listening for a while. He didn't say a word, but when he turned to leave, his footsteps were heavier than when he brought them in. Because now, he was not only deciding the fate of Little Moore, he was deciding whether he had the courage to give the truth one more chance to step into the light before dawn. Night dropped over Red Wash fast. The main street slipped into shadow. Only the saloon stayed lit, with a tired banjo stumbling over the same tune. At the far end of the row, the little jail sat in the dark, one oil lamp flickering by the door. Sheriff Maddox sat alone at the desk. In front of him were a cup of cold coffee and the ledger of cases. The line that read Abigail Moore to be hanged at noon lay thick across the page. He slowly added 2 more words beside it. Postponed, then set the pen down. He was not a man who was used to changing his own orders. In the left cell, Abigail lay turned toward the wall. The rope had left its mark on her neck. Every swallow burned. In the right cell, Owen leaned back against the bars, his arms folded tight across his chest. After a while, soft footsteps tapped down the hallway. Reverend Hale's wife came in, carrying a small wicker basket and a jug of water. "I brought a little bread," she said. "No one should go to sleep on an empty stomach, no matter what tomorrow is." The sheriff unlocked the inner door and passed a piece of bread and a tin cup of water to each of them. Abigail took hers with both hands. The cool water slid down her raw throat. Mrs. Hale asked gently, "Child, do you have anyone in Red Wash, family or a friend?" "No," Abigail said. "My mother died in Kansas. My father died on the road. My brother disappeared when I was 16. I came here alone, found work. Then this happened." The older woman nodded slowly. I lost a child too, she said. Not to a gun, to sickness. But the way the world just kept on going, as if that little soul had never been here. That I understand. She did not ask if Abigail had killed anyone. She did not preach. She only left the empty basket and that one unfinished sentence, then walked out. The jail grew quiet again. Owen finished his bread. He needed strength for the morning. Though he had no idea what waited there, he turned his head toward the other cell. If they set you free tomorrow, where will you go? He asked. Abigail let out a dry little laugh. You think they're going to free me? The whole town has already swallowed the words Jed's killer. They need a name to close the book. They've picked it. I don't know every detail about that alley, Owen said. I just know Jed had a habit of grabbing at women. He sat near the window. Any young thing walked past. He reached out like she was a piece of property, not a person to greet. I saw it more than once and kept my head down, drank my whiskey, and walked away, same way I did with my wife, standing still and telling myself it wasn't my business. In the dark, Abigail let out a breath. Maybe that's why you're in this cell, she said. Not because you're some kind of saint, because you're tired of standing still. Owen gave a low, brief chuckle. Could be, he said. But if they hang you tomorrow, I still want the first neck they have to step past to be mine. At the desk, Sheriff Maddox rested his elbows on the scarred wood. He could not catch every word, only the steady rise and fall of two voices in the night. He thought back to the two witnesses from that morning, the waiter and the wagon driver, telling their story like a memorized verse. No stumble, no hard swallow. The night crept toward the small hours. The coffee went stone cold. Maddox still had not moved from his chair. One thought paced round and round in his mind. If Red Wash hanged an innocent woman, the town would stay quiet on the surface. But that quiet would be like a deep layer of dust settling over something no one wanted to look at. And sooner or later, another man like Owen Price would step into the middle of the square and ask, "What have we done?" Morning had not fully broken when Sheriff Maddox pushed himself up from the chair. He stepped out onto the porch. The early air was cool and still. Red Wash was still asleep. Only the dust on the street never slept. He did not go back into his house. Instead, he cut across behind the row of buildings, to the narrow alley between the saloon and the livery stable. The place where they said Abigail had shot Jed Hollis. The alley was dim even with the sky gone gray. The wooden walls on both sides crowded close together. There was the thin smell of spilled whiskey, old trash, and sun-baked urine. Maddox stood for a moment, staring down at the patch of ground where they had dragged Jed's body away the day before. The dirt there was still darker than the rest. He tried standing where they said Abigail had been. Then he moved to the spot where Jed was supposed to have fallen. He took a few steps and ran straight into the wall. One corner of his mouth twitched. Something did not line up. Behind him, the saloon door opened with a creak. Briggs, the owner, stuck his head out. "Sheriff, you're up early." "So are you," Maddox answered. "Yesterday you said you saw the Moore girl and Jed in this alley. Tell it to me again." Briggs scratched his head. "I heard shouting. Went to the back door. Jed was already down. The girl had the gun. That's all there is to it." "Where were you standing when you saw that?" Maddox asked. "Right in the back doorway," Briggs said. "Looked out and there they were." The sheriff walked over to the back door and took the spot Briggs had pointed out. From there, looking out into the alley, he could see the darker patch of dirt and the wall. But part of the view was blocked by a big whiskey barrel set just to the side. A strip of ground lay hidden in its shadow. If Jed was lying tight against that far wall, Maddox said slowly, "you couldn't see his face from here. Just a leg, maybe. You sure you're not filling in the picture? Saw somebody standing, somebody down, and your mind wrote the rest. Briggs was quiet, longer than he meant to be. I've got a business to open, he muttered, and shut the door. Maddox let out a breath. He turned back into the alley. The light had grown a little. In the darker corner, a small, thin shape was bent over a trash barrel, rummaging. The stable boy he'd seen a dozen times before. "Billy," the sheriff called. "Come here." The boy jumped. He clutched a little sack to his chest, like he thought someone was going to snatch it. "I didn't take nothing from the saloon, sir. Just old bottles," he blurted. "I'm not asking about that," Maddox said. "The day Jed died. Where were you?" Billy swallowed hard. "Down there. By the stable. I was leading a drunk's horse back in. I heard yelling. I looked through the crack in the boards." "Go on," the sheriff said, his voice easing a little. "Jed had her shoved up against the wall," the boy rushed out. His hand was over her mouth. Other hand was grabbing at her. She hit him. He slapped her. I got scared and was going to run, but I heard her say, "Let me go. I will shoot for real." So I looked back. His hand was on her wrist. The gun was pointing at the ground. Then it went off. Jed fell. She fell too. I ran. Maddox stared at him. "Did you tell anybody?" Billy shook his head. "Nobody asked, and it was Jed. Everybody's scared of him. I'm just a hired stable kid. If I talked, they'd likely just throw me out." The sheriff nodded slowly. He reached out and ruffled the boy's crumpled hat. "Go on then. Don't leave town. If I need you to say that again, you'll tell it just like this." "All right." Billy bobbed his head and took off at a run. Dust jumped up behind his heels. Maddox stood alone in the alley. The boy's words circled in his mind. Whose hand on whose wrist? The barrel pointed down. One shot. A man who had made a habit of using his strength on women. A girl who had nobody standing beside her. He was on his way back to the jail when the sun finally pushed up over the edge of the town. In the cell, Owen was already on his feet. His eyes were deep set with a night without sleep, but he was clear. Abigail sat on the bench, her arms folded tight across her chest, as if she were holding herself together. "On your feet," the sheriff said. "Both of you. I've got some things I need to hear straight. Every piece. Before the sun reaches the top of the sky." He pulled a chair over and sat facing the bars. This time his voice did not sound like a man reading a sentence off a page. It sounded like a man who wanted to know. Really know. "Abigail Moore," Maddox said. "Today you're going to tell me about that night. Step by step. From the minute you walked out the back door of the saloon to the moment the gun went off. No extra color. No pieces left out. Because right now, for the first time, I'm beginning to think I may have ordered a hanging for someone I never truly let speak." Abigail spoke slowly, like someone walking back over every step of a road she had taken in the dark. She talked about the tray of drinks she carried to the back door, about Jed's breath full of whiskey in her face, about his hand grabbing her elbow and dragging her into the alley, about the smell of liquor and sweat pressed up against her, about what he whispered in her ear. "No one's going to hear you." She talked about the little gun hidden in her skirt. Her father had given it to her before he died. "Don't point it at a man if you don't mean to shoot, but if you have to shoot, don't aim for his foot." She said Jed laughed when he saw the gun. Her wrist was locked in his grip. The barrel was pointed down at the ground. The last thing she remembered was saying, "Let go. I will shoot for real." Then her arm was jerked hard. One shot. Jed fell. She fell. And then came the sound of boots, shouts. No one asked a question. They just tore the gun out of her hand and sent for the sheriff. Sheriff Maddox listened all the way through. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he repeated what Billy the stable boy had told him, piece by piece, laying the two stories on top of each other, the places they met, the pieces he had skipped over before. Abigail did not cry. She only asked, "So what now, Sheriff?" "Now," Maddox said, "the gallows is still sitting out there. The rope is still there. But I am not hanging one more soul just because I was too lazy to look close at the dirt." He opened her cell first, then Owen's. "You two are coming out to the square with me," he said. "If this town watched a hanging with their own eyes yesterday, they can watch a sentence get wiped away the same way." At noon, Red Wash gathered again. The gallows still stood, but no one stood under the noose. Sheriff Maddox climbed the steps. Reverend Hale stood beside him. Down below were Owen and Abigail. The sheriff did not have to shout. "Yesterday I ordered the hanging of Abigail Moore," he said. "I did it on the word of two men who only saw from a distance. This morning I heard another word, from a boy who watched through a crack in the boards, and from her own mouth. The story is not what I wrote on that paper." He looked around the square. "Jed Hollis dragged her into that alley," Maddox said. "He put his hands on her in a way no woman should have to bear. His hand was on her wrist. The bullet went down and kicked back up. Maybe she did pull the trigger. But I call that self-defense, not murder for the price of a wallet." Someone shouted back, "The law is the law." "The law is the law," Maddox nodded, "and the law also gives me the right to set aside a hanging when the proof changes. I will not hang a woman for trying to keep her own body safe. Red Wash can talk all it wants, but my name is the one on this paper, and today I'm using it to strike out her death sentence." He crumpled the old warrant in his fist and tossed it off the platform. The paper fell into the dust. Silence held for a few heartbeats. Then people began to drift away. Some shook their heads. Some looked away. A few gave the smallest of nods toward the group at the gallows. When the square had thinned out, Owen turned to Abigail. "You're free now," he said. "You can leave Red Wash behind if you want." Abigail looked around. The red dust street, the door of the cafe, the dark mouth of the alley. The gallows that had almost been the last place she ever stood. "Where would I go?" she asked, her voice no longer defiant. "Just tired." Owen turned his hat in his hands. "My ranch still has a lot of empty space," he said. "I could use someone who knows how to keep a ledger, who can cook a decent meal, who'll say a few words now and then so the house isn't so quiet. And you could use a place where no one calls you the one who killed Jed every time you walk through a door. If you want, you can come out there. Not as some debt I'm owed, just as someone who shares the same yard and the same roof." Abigail was quiet. Hot wind moved through the square and lifted a few grains of dust off the ground. "If I come out there," she said very softly, "is there going to be a day when you stick your neck out again because of me?" Owen shook his head. "No," he said. "If a hard day comes, we'll stand side by side. No one goes to the noose in place of the other anymore." That fall, if you rode the dirt road that led out across the fields south of Red Wash, you'd see a small ranch with a fence mended fresh. On the porch were two chairs, one old, one a little newer. On some evenings, Abigail sat in the newer chair with a cup of coffee in her hands, watching the sun drop behind the dusty horizon. Owen sat beside her. He did not talk much. He just rested his arm on the rail. When the air cooled, she leaned her head, very lightly, against his shoulder. He flinched for a moment, then let it be. "I'm still afraid," she said. "Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see the noose. I still hear people calling me a killer." "I'm afraid too," Owen answered. Now, every time the wind whistles in the house, I remember the sound of the doctor closing the door and leaving my wife behind. Some things don't go away. They just sit with us. The difference is, now they don't sit alone anymore. Abigail smiled just a little. No one out in the yard could have heard it. She turned her hand, and for the first time, she closed her fingers around his rough hand resting on the rail. Owen let it stay there. He did not grip tight. He did not pull away. That night, before they went inside, she leaned over and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Short. Awkward. Like someone learning how to trust again. He did not say anything. He only opened the door so they could step through together. Behind them, the gallows had been taken apart. The boards were being used to mend the horse stalls. The old rope lay coiled in a corner of the yard, back where it belonged. Just a tool now, not a sentence. If tonight, listening to this story, you find yourself remembering a time you stood alone under other people's judgment, I hope you'll stay with these small, healing tales of the West. Tap subscribe if this story let your heart soften even a little. Click like and leave a comment to tell me. Has there ever been someone who dared to stand on your side when the rest of the world turned away?